Hey guys, so I recorded this video a couple of months ago, a version of it, but nobody watched it, so I thought there'd be no harm in re-recording, because I think I can express what I wanted to express in a more concise way. Now, if in the earlier video we talked about the West or East Germanic peoples, it only also makes sense to talk about the East Germanic languages. Now, the East Germanic languages, of course, is a branch of the Germanic language family. You may know that English is part of the West Germanic branch of the Germanic languages. We also have the Scandinavian languages, like Icelandic, Norwegian, Swedish. They are in the North Germanic branch. So we have the West Germanic branch, the North Germanic branch. The East Germanic branch is not nearly as well known or widely talked about because it's dead. There are no East Germanic languages, there haven't been for a long time, and the best attested one we have is Gothic, and so people talk about the Gothic language sometimes, but that stopped being spoken, again, well over 1,000 years ago, at least in the kind of Gothic we know about. But we also have other East Germanic languages. We also have Vandalic, potentially Gephardic, Burgundian maybe, lots of potential East Germanic languages that we simply don't know anything about. So other than Gothic, Vandalic is the only East Germanic language we really have any attestation of, and that's just kind of a few inscriptions here and there. And yeah, other than Gothic and Vandalic, it's just guesswork, right? We don't really know. I think it's useful to compare the Germanic language family to the Romance language family, because I think people might be more familiar generally with the Romance languages, so Latin, and then the descendants, French, Spanish, Portuguese, Italian, and the thing about the Romance languages is, of course, they were born out of the Roman Empire, right? And so the Roman Empire spread Latin throughout Europe. As such, Latin was widely spoken for a long time. I think a major difference then between the Romance languages and the Germanic languages is that with the Germanic languages, they diverged long before Latin did, right? So while the Roman Empire was around, you basically just have Latin, not even really dialects of Latin. They slowly develop, and then by the end of the first millennium, you have kind of the beginnings of Spanish and French and whatnot. But with the Germanic languages, as early as kind of the 1st or 2nd century AD, you start getting different dialects and different languages. Certainly by maybe the 200s, you would have a distinct East Germanic dialect, a distinct North Germanic dialect, maybe a couple of West Germanic dialects as well. And so yeah. That being said, I think for the whole of the existence of the Roman Empire, much as you could go from one end of Europe to the other, you could go from, Portugal to France, I don't know, wherever Latin was spoken, and you'd be able to be understood speaking Latin. They all spoke some variety of Latin, very much the same language across Europe. The same was true of the Germanic languages for a while, so even if you have distinct East, West, and North Germanic dialects, the Germanic languages would have been intelligible with each other. You know, in the 400s, the 500s, you could still have taken a Goth from the Black Sea, transported them to kind of, Norway, where they were speaking Norse, and they probably would have been understood quite easily. They probably could have spoken to each other, the Goths and the Vikings, at least for the whole time the Roman Empire existed. It was you know, the Germanic languages hadn't diverged very much. And if there was a kind of dialect continuum, as I'm suggesting, across Europe, then it leads to the question of what exactly is the boundary of an East Germanic language? What counts as East Germanic? What counts as West Germanic? What counts as North Germanic? And I actually, I think it's a lot harder to define than some people tend to make it out to be. In the previous video, I alluded to the fact that the Burgundians, they're often assumed to be East Germanic. You know, they're listed by, I think, Tacitus as an East Germanic people group, but that's it. We only have one or two sources suggesting that the Burgundians were East Germanic, and at that point in time, in the 1st century, the East Germanic and West Germanic peoples were living in basically the same area. You know, all of the Germanic peoples were living around Germany, Denmark, Sweden, kind of. And so it's really not cut and dry. And I think another example is the Suebi, or also the Lombards, the Langobards. These people groups, we think they were West Germanic, right? But they certainly interacted with East Germanic peoples a lot. You know, in the 400s, the kingdoms of the Suebi and the Lombards, certainly there was a lot of cross-cultural kind of interaction with Goths and Vandals. And so an interesting question is, what would their languages have sounded like? Would they have sounded more like Gothic than like, you know, German? Often the best clues we have when we have such limited kind of textual evidence of languages such as Gothic and certainly any other East Germanic language, the best clues we have are not in linguistics but in other forms of study. Wow, something just moved in those bushes. Anyway, religion, right? So we know that the Goths were Arian Christians. They converted to Arian Christianity, as did the Vandals, as did many other Germanic peoples. And Arian Christianity is often a good proxy for whether a group of people was East Germanic or not. Just to clarify, I mean Arian Christianity as opposed to Trinitarian Christianity. And it is a fairly minor distinction, but essentially the Arians believed that the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit were not one in the same, that Jesus was begotten of the Father, of God. And this was quite a major theological split at the time, even though Arian Christians, it's not like they believed Jesus was immortal, amortal that is, or that Jesus was anything other than divine. They believed that Jesus was the first creation in the universe, created of the essence of the Father immediately. So it really was a minor difference between Arianism and Trinitarianism, but the Roman Empire became Trinitarian, and so Arians were heretics, right? And so again, we have the Goths, the Vandals, also the Burgundians, right? And this is the best evidence we have that the Burgundians would have been East Germanic, is that they followed Arian Christianity. It's raining now, but of course all of these groups after the fall of the Roman Empire eventually adopted the more mainstream Nicene Christianity. The thing about the East Germanic peoples, which I find very interesting, is that they were actually so successful at conquest that eventually their languages and culture were lost because they simply assimilated into the territories of the people they conquered. So the Visigoths simply became Spanish. The Ostrogoths simply became Italian. The Gepids, we don't really know what happened to them, but presumably they became Slavs or Romanians maybe. Each of these groups of people within a few hundred years of the end of the Western Roman Empire in 476, no longer existed. So it's hard to say how distinct Gothic and Vandalic and Gephardic were from each other. Indeed, whether Burgundian was a language, and what sort of language Burgundian was, whether Visigothic and Ostrogothic became two separate languages, or whether those were simply Gothic, those were remained similar to each other, we don't know. Finally, we have the Crimean Goths. Now, for anyone that knows about the Crimean Goths, you will know we have one attested source for Crimean Gothic. It is from the 1600s, which is, of course, nearly 1,000 years after any other East Germanic language was spoken. But we don't know, and indeed, it's likely that Crimean Gothic was not descended from Biblical Gothic. It could have been a completely different language. But again, we don't know. It was probably East Germanic, though, based on the words we have. So, yeah. Thanks for listening. Luckily stopped raining now. I'll see you next time, I guess.